Thank you, listeners. It is a Wednesday in advance of the regular Elko County Commission meeting, and I'm your host, Lori Gilbert. Very pleased to feature in studio today our guest, Elko County Commissioner Delmo Andreozzi joins us today, and always a pleasure, Delmo, to sit across from you. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be here. It's been great to visit with you before we went on air and catch up. Those things are important to do, aren't they? You know, we talk about how life, the seasons of life, right? We kind of experience seasons of life and how so many things change, from earlier in our careers and earlier what we were doing in our community, and now with I've got 6 grandchildren. It's the greatest thing in the world. But things change and priorities change, and but we're still for the most part doing well and happy and healthy, and that's the important thing.
That's the important thing. And as you celebrate your grandkids, I'm so pleased that John and I have a daughter who is graduating from the University of Nevada, Reno. Go Wolfpack!
Yay, Olivia.
Olivia graduates on the 19th. I'm going to miss being a Wolfpack mom. I liked that more than I thought.
Yeah,
I was really kind of into that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so she's thinking of graduate school, but obviously life goes on, and that 4 years went by really fast, Delmo.
Well, it does, and congratulations to Olivia and all the graduates that are coming up, whether it's a high school or college, and grab the world by the tail and go get them.
Yeah, go get them. Our commissioner, of course, will talk today. We always just like to chat about stuff like our families, but I guess we better look at the agenda.
Let's do it.
So thank you. The commission will meet at 1:30 today in regular session, and you can zoom in on that meeting if you like, or you can attend in person. It's always nice. I know they appreciate having faces in the audience as well. And among the issues today, let's see, we were going over some of the highlights. Oh, there is going to be recognition, which is really nice, during the recent emergency that we had, of course, in responding to COVID-19 and much more. The Nevada Emergency Preparedness Association Eastern Nevada chapter is going to recognize some partners in Great Basin College for their work.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's no question that throughout that whole situation, we had a tremendous team, and a team is comprised of people, and people who did a lot of heavy lifting. So Lee, being on this, actually nominated Dr. Amber Denali and Pat Anderson to be recognized. They are being recognized, and rightfully so. They led the charge in so many areas, and they're a tremendous asset in our community and a tremendous partner in our community. So it's appropriate and great to be able to recognize. I think us in the rural area, we just do what we got to do. We don't expect any recognition or anything like that. But it's nice to take time and just say, hey, job well done. We appreciate you and thank you. And this is kind of how I see that. It would be nice if we had time to do that more often. People don't expect it, but it's nice to recognize people when they go above and beyond.
Yeah, so very proud of Dr. Denali and, of course, Pat Anderson, who I understand has retired from GBC, but she's still active in emergency planning.
She is, and she's been a tremendous asset. She's a very bright individual in her own right, and she actually serves on the Elko Convention and Visitors Authority as well with me. So she's new to that role, and I've known Pat for a long time and have always appreciated my working relationship and my friendship with her.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Delmo. That's wonderful. There's also a proclamation, which this is perfect timing because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and the county commissioners are set to recognize it as so. Yeah,
and this is something that just, it isn't that we haven't always had these types of issues, but it just seems to be so much, it appears to me to be a lot worse or a lot more serious in so many instances, and I know we talk about it all the time, and we've got issues at the jail in our community, all centered around this this behavioral health issue, and it's a tough one. It's a tough thing, but it's important, I think, for us to at least recognize and talk about it. It's important to talk about it. It's important for people to understand what resources are out there and how they can have access to them. We're not in a vacuum. We don't have everything that we need, but there are resources out there, and again, these bring up those types of issues so that talk about and really try to address, because people are in critical situations from time to time. I know, in the sheriff's department, they've got these iPads that they've used, and I just talked to our undersheriff Justin yesterday, and they were actually able to actually deploy and use one of those with someone who was in pretty serious state, and actually was very helpful. So there's just those things are out there, and like I said, you see violence is on the rise, and all of that, all of those issues that are, it's really hard to pinpoint what the point source is, but boy, you can't underscore how serious it is, not only just in our own community, but across the nation.
Well, I did want to reassure you too, Delmo, we had a wonderful weekend of healing and awareness and support with Zero Suicides of Elko County and their Saturday event at the Convention Center. Haley DeGrieve, actually, of the Gray Matters Collective, is just a delightful person. Good. Oh, my goodness. And Jeffrey Trower came with his drumming cohort, and just the simple message that you matter. And I think that the whole community is going to be able to revolve around that and get together and go forward. Elko, Nevada Health Centers has an Elko area resource guide for behavioral and mental health. So pick one of those up. There are little cards too, just business card size, with all kinds of numbers of support services that are right here in Elko. So we just want to emphasize that there is a lot of practical support, Delmo, but there's also a lot of care here.
There is, and no matter where you are, just know that there are people that care about you, and the people ready to help anyway. But sometimes you just ache for people that are in various areas of crisis in their life, and I believe I'm always a believer in hope and in tomorrow, and we just need to continue to talk about that. We need to talk about what opportunities there are ahead of us.
You would love Haley. I think she's about a 25-year-old woman, and she talked about hope a lot, Delmo. She said hope stands for hold on, pain ends.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, and that's a very powerful acronym, right? And so again, something so simple that maybe we can latch on to. I mean, I think about all the things that we've been through in our life, whether it's, you just know inherently or automatically, if you're in trouble, you dial 911, right? And so these things we learned, the importance of clicking your seatbelt. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. I mean, I remember commercials as a kid. You'd see a doctor on a commercial smoking a cigarette, right? And that's all been expunged from the from the airwaves. So, there's a lot of power in messaging and how simple that could be. Nice little acronym that people could use and use to remember that pain, isn't that true?
Pain hold on, pain ends.
Yeah, that's a great one. I like it.
Oh, I'm glad. Though we'll help spread the word, certainly. County commissioners will meet this afternoon, and again, they have a proclamation right at the top of the agenda proclaiming May as Mental Health Awareness Month. So all of us together can make that huge difference. If we're kind of looking ahead on the agenda as well, USDA Rural Development is going to make a program or a presentation regarding affordable housing and other programs for local residents.
Yeah, and I don't have any information on this particular item. I have a lot of interest in this item, so I'm looking forward to the presentation. I'm not even sure who's going to be here to talk about it, but this is again something that's super important. Affordable housing. The county has been trying to do some affordable housing, specifically in the jackpot area. So, and that's a challenge. I mean, all the consumable goods are all going up through the roof. The price of homes, all of that. That's all lending that. We're seeing interest rates go up, and so there's a lot of things out there, and so I'm really interested to see what they have, and maybe we can learn something again, share that with the community and people because I think at the end of the day, I think that's what's so great about where we live is just that ability to have ownership. That dream that we have in America, it's so different than where it is everywhere else. You can actually build and in most people, it's their biggest asset. If not all people, it's an asset. So what a privilege. So we just got to figure out a way to get more people into housing. So I'm really interested in hearing about this one.
Delmo Andreozzi is our county commissioner and leading our discussion today. And people should know that that is your particular interest. You are a professional realtor, and so I think you'll bring a great deal to that discussion, Delmo. People can really appreciate the kind of questions, because it's unfortunate when wages don't meet that desire, to purchase a home. And we do have inflated wages as a result of the mining industry, which we don't begrudge anyone that, but it's a little hard to keep up.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah, so that'll be an important discussion. And then next is probably going to attract a lot of attention on today's agenda. The Elko County Advisory Board to Manage Wildlife, as Chairman Jim Cooney is going to present a letter asking commissioners to support quota recommendations to the State Board of Wildlife Commission. It's been a rough winter on deer herds.
It really has, and there's a lot of supporting document in the agenda regarding this. There's like 4 or 5 exhibits in there, and they're very beefy. So, I haven't really seen a quota conversation come to the commission in a long time. So, when I saw this on the agenda, I did personally reach out to Jim and just say, hey, what's going on, and trying to get an understanding of what's happening here. So, like you alluded to, and we've seen it so many times that, whether it's wildfire or other hazards, and now we had this. It's the snow we had it's a blessing, and it's also can be a little bit of a curse too. So, and speaking with Jim and looking at the exhibits there, that mule deer herd was something that was impacted pretty good. So the recommendation is to significantly reduce the mule deer quota for this upcoming year, and personally I think it's appropriate. We want to see them be healthy and rebound, and I think the promising thing is that the elk herd had seemed to come through the winter very well, and so there's no change there. It didn't appear to be any change there, and same thing with the antelope. If there's any reduction, it's very minimal compared to the mule deer. So that mule deer population and that outdoor recreation has for as long as I can remember. I have pictures of my dad when in his youth of harvesting mule deer. That's a part of our culture. It's a part of what we have here. And so, I think the measures they've taken is appropriate. And again, I think it's good that it comes to the commission, so that again it helps disseminate information so that there's no surprise, right? And then I think it's got this secondary ideal thing is that it enjoys the support of the local CAB, or the County Advisory Board. So I think that those are two good things that we know that they're working together. I know sometimes in the past, sometimes that relationship's been a little bit controversial. So this looks like they're all working together, and they support it. So I suspect that certainly would support the work that they do. And again, I think it's probably more about getting information out than anything else.
Yeah, thanks, Delmo. It's certainly suggested in the draft letter from Elko County Board of Commissioners Chair Rex Denninger that this sentence really stands out, and it's important. It looks like everybody's on the same page. As the letter says, we applaud the NDOW biologists who've done their best to address the future of the herds while continuing to support the sportsmen who will bring dollars to the Elko County economy. So again, in the interest of protecting the deer herds, mitigating harmful impacts that do include destruction from wildfire and wild horses, as well as ongoing drought and now this harsh winter. So again, this is an effort in support of sustaining the wildlife. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Delmo. Just want to make sure that if anybody had questions, obviously that'll be a good discussion, and you can be on hand for the meeting at the County Commission meeting room on Court Street, or you can certainly Zoom in and attend that way virtually. Yeah,
and again, I would just invite anybody, if they have any interest in some of the technical data, there are, like I said, 4 or 5 exhibits in the agenda. You can hyperlink on those and look on them. They're very detailed documents. So if anybody has any interest, that's there for you to review.
All right. Thanks, Delmo. Talking with our Commissioner Andreozzi. And let's see, I'm just flipping through the agenda here. Oh, there is a Nevada Wildfire Awareness Campaign. That'll be presented by the Elko County Fire Protection District. And then some consideration of the Wildland Fire Protection, the actual program.
Yeah. And, both, you almost can't even hardly imagine that we're talking about wildfire when, but we need to be prepared. It always happens, and I think with this moisture, we're probably going to see fuels, probably increase. So again, we need to be we need to be proactive in everything that we do, and it's about risk reduction and managing, whether it's on your own personal property or just some of the things we do as these fuels come into play and start to dry out, which they do every year. We've been lucky in terms of wildland fire the last couple of years, but that doesn't mean we couldn't have another bad year, because we've had some horrific years. And so, again, there's ways to be fire wise and smart, and we encourage all residents to exercise extreme caution. And again, it's about risk reduction. How do we factor into not creating any or making any wildfires that happen naturally worse, so that we can all do things. We've seen some of that erratic behavior that we've talked about in this studio before. We've seen some of these fires spot like nothing in the past, so just as if you live out where there's not so much where your property's not so protected, take the extra step to mow down some of that vegetation when the time's right, so that you're protected.
So that'll be a part of the discussion. And it's a really good transition, too, even though not on the agenda. But we do know that Elko County included in the disaster designation by the governor and then the federal government?
Yes,
okay.
we were. And, I know FEMA came out here to look at some of that. A lot of that didn't qualify. But, as I was reflecting on some of that, there are mitigation dollars. So one of the things that I was talking to our team about was, looking at these areas and identifying issues and maybe coming up with mitigation plans so that we can have some additional resources to address this. Because, quite frankly, and it's an ongoing discussion. This can be a very tough environment to be in. With all the miles and miles and miles and miles and miles of road that we have. And most of it's unmaintained, and some of it's very little maintained. So, we saw snow drifts out in the Ruby Valley area that were, that road was closed for extended periods of time. And so, again, we had an opportunity to partner with the Forest Service and NDOT, and, where we're working together but a lot of those people were isolated out there, and I would like to just mention that we all know this, but you can be in a lot of places in Elko County where you don't have cell service. So if you're landlocked there, and you don't have your phone service, or it can be a real serious situation there. So again, we want to look at some of those mitigation things, and I've always thought about that, and I think as we kind of think about how much snowpack that's still up there and is still going to come down off the mountain, we've been very fortunate so far. We have our emergency manager, Lee Cabness, is just doing a fantastic job working with and networking and with all the stakeholders, the cities, the state, and other governmental officials, and even the Weather Service monitoring the water and the floods. And so right now, everything's going good, but there's still a heck of a lot of snow that's got to come down out of the mountains. So I often think about whether it's snow or flooding or whatever the case may be, you've got this built environment and Mother Nature. There's very little. You try to be as proactive as you possibly can, but there's very little you can do. So, but we're doing everything that we can. We've got the sandbag stations. We're in communication with people. We're monitoring it. So those are the kinds of things that we can do. And I would also just say, along with that, with this melting condition, I know that the Lamoille Canyon, there's been some rock slides up there. So just when you go out there, just be mindful of the earth might not be stable. So just be careful, and you might find a rock slide or a closed road, or if you see something on a county road, be sure to let our road crew know so that we can address it. We're trying to keep all the culverts open, and I think we've been lucky here compared to some places in the county, or not in the county, I'm sorry, in the state, where some other counties are having a significant amount of infrastructure damage. We have some, certainly, but not to the extent that they are elsewhere. But we had a snowpack that was like 200% of normal. So again, it's great to have that water up there, and we've been very fortunate that it's come off slow. But sooner or later it's going to come off that mountain.
Right, Delmo. And it is going to be a bit cooler taking the turn into the weekend, so that should help to slow the melt, if you will. So that is good news. But yeah, keep all that in mind. Those rock and mudslides are dangerous. If the road's closed, it's for safety. And keep in mind, too, that the Forest Service and the county are on board together with this. In fact, the counties help to look at how to mitigate the hazards and clear the debris just as soon as possible.
Yep, we're working together on a number of things. We've got just an outstanding relationship with the Forest Service, and I'm very grateful for that, because when you're out here, we need to lean on each other. We need to share with each other, because we don't have the resources that they have in other places in the United States, let alone even compared to the other side of our own state. So it's important that we lean on each other and share resources and help each other where we can. And you did mention the WFPP. I just want to talk about that really quickly, if I can, Lori. That really is like an interlocal agreement, or it's a fire protection agreement that we have with the state, and it deals with how we deal with fires that happen on federal or private land or all those other things. But there's also this insurance component that we have, and so we have an annual payment, and our annual payment is extremely high. This last year, or this upcoming two years, is $811,000 a year, which is down from the previous year. But I certainly question the methodology of how they come up with that structure. We're grateful to have it, because, as you know, when we have a massive fire year that literally can cost millions of dollars, that's kind of like a stop gap for us. And then there's this partnership of again, how we all work together to fight a fire when something happens. But again, we think about Elko County, for instance, 11 million acres, 17,000 square miles, and 54,000 people. That's it. It's just a huge geographic area. So, just wanted to explain that a little bit. And if you recall, we did dedicate some of the property tax to pay specifically for this, because at one time that was just being paid by the fire district. And this really is a county-wide burden, so we've shifted the property tax to cover this payment for us. So I just wanted to make sure. I know that gets really confusing, and I just want to reemphasize how some of those dollars are being used.
Well, thanks, Delmo. I think that people could understand it is an investment, if you will, and it is because one fire could bankrupt Elko County. Certainly, it affects public and private interests. So when you look at it at the grand scale, $811,000 a year is probably a pretty wise investment for the kind of fire protection and coverage that we get. So, yeah. And every county does it too. Mm-hmm. It's not just Elko County.
Right. I'm so glad you said that. There's all 17 counties participate in this plan. Thank you for saying that. The fees, there's a formula in there. Like I said, I think that there's, in my own humble opinion, I think there's room to look at how that formula is there. I'm not certain that it's really fair. Maybe that's a good way to say it, but that's been in existence for a long time, and that's maybe a battle for another day. But again, it's something that we need to look at, and something that all 17 counties participate with. Yeah,
it's interesting. You might see if there's another fund, maybe possibly a share of net proceeds or something. Sure. That could be, because obviously that the mining industry benefits from having fire suppression and protection too, since they're located on those vast public lands, mostly public. And then if we move on to legislation, boy, do we know that Elko County has a bit of legislation that would be very impactful, Delmo, and that would be the prevailing wage. Mm-hmm. And some say the unintended consequence, that it's not deliberate, but certainly it feels deliberate, that would target public-private partnerships. Yeah. And these are this is huge.
This has been, there are a lot of bills. It's like 1,000 bills that are out there, and it's hard to watch them all, and there's lots of them, that just like everything else, some are good, some are bad, and they're always, I think, anytime you have a bill, there always can be unintended consequences, because people maybe don't dive into it fully enough. Sorry, Lori, dive into it fully enough to really understand what some of the consequences might be. And, early on, I saw Senate Bill 226 and really kind of keyed in on that, and was really kind of sounding the alarm and the drum far and wide, and we've provided testimony to the legislature. I mean, that thing is moving through like it's on a freight train. But the real big issue that I have with that particular bill is it actually says that if you have a municipality that gives or leases or whatever property to a nonprofit for under fair market value, whatever they do on that property is subject to prevailing wage. And there wasn't, the original bill didn't say effective, it didn't say if you've acquired the property at this day forward. So it actually reaches back in time. And that's really problematic, because I think that for us here in the rural areas, and I know that's the case here in Elko and Elko County, is we rely on these nonprofits to provide these real significant social, they are the social safety net for so many of the most vulnerable in our population. And it's those types of partnerships that we've had throughout the years, where we've built this infrastructure here and been able to do that for a pretty reasonable cost. So I'll just give you an example, and I've got a list of examples of who this would impact. But just as an example, Head Start. Head Start's on Golf Course Road. That's got a low lease, and so all of that stuff would have been built in accordance with public prevailing wage, and it's not just being built. You could have, like, let's say, I don't know, a roof is expensive. Maybe it's $100,000. Boom, you trigger prevailing wage, and it's just a super expensive. And I think they're trying to close. Maybe that has gotten abused elsewhere. I don't know what the driving force is behind all of that, but to me, it's absolutely disastrous with what we're doing here in the local area in partnering with our nonprofits to do this. I cited the Head Start. There are a number, and some that may be, some that may not necessarily be. They may already be subject to prevailing wage, like some of the other entities, but certainly this is something that has a significant impact. CADV is another classic example, and think of the great work that they do at that facility. And so, banging and it would impact affordable housing and economic development. So early on, those were some of the things that we said. So that most recent edit, there's a carve out for affordable housing, great. And then they said they didn't necessarily reach back in time with projects that have already been built, So, but the thing they're not realizing is that a lot of these places have leases. So when that lease expires and it comes up for renewal again, like the museum, for example, guess what? It's lumped into this being required to be following prevailing wages. We have that, the baseball field out by the fire district out there in Spring Creek. We're working on a plan to dedicate that to the Spring Creek. And, even if there's no fee lease, that would be subject to it. I mean, it's the racetrack. It just goes on and on and on and on. And so that's a real serious unintended consequence that, I've worked really hard behind the scenes to try to make sure people are aware of that. But it raced right through the Senate. It's on the Assembly side, and we'll see where it goes. And then the other one that's a companion to that that's equally as troubling is Senate Bill 433. And Senate Bill 433 essentially makes the Labor Commission responsible for determining what is a public works. So in other words, you have a project, you got to have them say, yep, that's a public works or not a public works project. And then the second part, that's bad enough in and of itself, but then the second part of that bill says that whatever they decide is final and binding. There's no judicial review or anything. So, I struggle giving an administrative authority that kind of power. I don't think that should rest with an administrative authority. So, they have a fiscal note just for them to supply that service is like a $1.5 million. Where's that going to come from? Is that really in the best interest in the state of Nevada? I don't think it is. Again, I fully don't understand why this is coming about or what's happening in some of the other areas of the state that's really made this a priority for them. My criticism as I look at these bills, I wish that, they do the digestive explanation of the bill. Sometimes they're written well and sometimes they're not. And I really wish what they would do is just put a little bit in the narrative that says, this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is what the intent is. You don't have that. So when you don't have that, you're forced to
assume all kinds of things.
Assume what the intent is.
And that's dangerous.
It is. And I think you have to assume the worst case scenario, right? So very, very troubling. And, we hope that we can get it massaged as it goes through the assembly side. And then, ultimately, if it's passed, then it'll sit on the governor's desk for, and hopefully this particular one, there's lots of bad bills out there, but hopefully this is one that doesn't make it through, and I think, and I would just like to say, with our local legislators, I've been working a lot with Senator Goicoechea and Assemblyman Gurr, and those guys have done an outstanding job representing us. They are severely outnumbered, and but they have done as good a job as anyone, just trying to hold off the tide. It's a real challenge, and I think. Some of the other suggestions, well, let's have this population driven instead of, because when you think about public works projects, if you looked at the rest of Nevada, the proportionate share of public works projects is insignificant compared to how many public works projects they do in Clark County or Washoe for that matter. It's like for instance, I know like with the city of Elko has to save up a couple of years to do a road project. They can't even do it every single year, right? And that threshold of $100,000, that's just a very low threshold. So anyway, I really beat that one up, and I apologize about that, but it's something I'm super passionate about because I think it potentially has some very significant unintended consequences to the good things we're trying to do.
Well, if you don't mind my saying, Commissioner Andreozzi, it sounds as though you've been working very hard on this, and as you had mentioned, behind the scenes, not looking for a lot of accolades. If there are any amendments or changes that are in our favor, I think we could look to you to thank you. This exhibits a lot of leadership in this area. I'm sure many people listening are aware that Senator Goicoechea is going to be retiring. He's term limited, and so he's in his last legislative session. As you said, he's just done a great job, and there's been discussion about who might replace him, Delmo, and I'm not sure, Commissioner Andreozzi, if that's something you've considered, but you've certainly showed some chops on this one.
I have been approached by a few people that have asked me to do that, and it is something that I have considered. I don't know, whether or not, it's too early for me to say, although, certainly that's something that would have to happen sooner rather than later. I've been very blessed to serve this community for as long as I have, and this community is in my heart, and this county is in my heart. So, if that's something I decide to do, I certainly look to, and it's like we talked about before we went on the air, this district is giant. Going all the way down into Clark County. So, even if I choose to run, there's certainly would be some opposition, but, making sure and knowing that I have the support of my family is super important to me. And then, I also want to be able to enjoy those grandkids too. So lots to consider, but, I have asked, and I know there are some great qualified people out there. I know that Assembly Ellison had mentioned to me that he was considering running, and he certainly knows those. He knows those halls. That's a little bit of a different form of government than what I'm used to. The content I know. The process is certainly a little bit different than what I'm used to.
Right, and you're certainly someone who is known for building those bridges and forming those relationships. And Delmo, you're a very likable person. I think you've been elected by the largest margins in the history of the county. I mean, as long as we've been covering elections here, you defeated a popular incumbent in a primary, and that's in a Republican race. So let's not discount those things.
Well, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve.
Well, thank you. Delmo Delmo, Andreozzi, and we better send you downtown.
Is it time?
I just don't want to make you late because
Okay.
all this talk will, of course. But anything else that's either on the agenda or ongoing, just in quick closing, that you want to make sure? I don't want you to leave anything out today.
I would just maybe really quickly, and let me just look at the clock. Yeah, we are a little bit over, and I do apologize that. So we do have an item on the agenda about declaring a state of emergency or a county emergency regarding the issue with wild horses. I'm not sure what that will do. I'm sure there's probably an appetite to do that, and really, it's about, again, trying to make, it's the only use on our public lands that's unmanaged. And so, again, if whatever we can do to help people understand what the real picture is, because I think I don't have anything against horses. I don't ride them. That's just not my gig. But I think that unfortunately that there's a piece that's been romanticized about it that really undermines what the reality is. And so I think if people saw the reality, there would be a more humane response. And so this is on our agenda, and I'm sure, again, I don't know what it will accomplish, other than to say that maybe it again shines a spotlight on an issue, trying to help educate people about what the real issue is, because they are way over the appropriate management levels and consume a lot of those that feed that other wildlife and other livestock rely on. So it's a pretty, and I know it's one of those things that can be a political hot button item, but again, it's about, if you really show people what the real situation is, maybe they have a more humane understanding of it.
We'll look for an ongoing conversation on that. Commissioner, that's just sort of the opening at the County Commission meeting today. It starts at 1:30 this afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner Delmo and Andreozzi, for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to our next visit.
Yes.
And thank you, listeners.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us for today's program, Elko Live, here on KELK.